identified the following levels. In general, there were two levels of servant. One that does the menial tasks that the master would not engage in because it's a descent from his world, chopping wood and so on. So this represents an avodah of a dry avodah of Kabbalah soil. He learns, he davens, he does everything, but it's all compelling himself, not with engaged mind and heart and joy and delight. Then there's the first or the second servant. The second servant is the one who does those tasks that the master would do, engages in commerce and so on. That's the avodah lalechas b'drachav. That's to enter God's realm, the realm of Torah mitzvahs. That defines him, and he does so with joy and so on, with delight. And the pasuk there is that conveys that is Oir tzadikim yismach, the light of the righteous gladdens, brings joy. It's expansive, it's expressive, as opposed to the servant who is in Yiddish verquetscht. He's just doing it because of the yoke. That's in general. Then he introduced another level within the higher servant. And that's the avodah of tefillah. What's the avodah of davening? He says the essence of davening is the cry to Hashem, the h'tשכ. What's the cry? So, because he understands the emes, that Hashem's the only reality, so there's the gival, the cry of the lie that the world presents, and the lie that he struggles with, which is a sense of independence, which is the great lie. As we explained, this sense of independence, ego, is the source of every other lie and abuse that exists under the sun. And so he cries out, "Vayitzak al Hashem batzar lahem." Now this is a lower level than the first one we just described in the highest servant. This is not with joy. And what he is dealing with is the world and its concealment, and seeks to overcome it. That's the avodah of tefillah. It's the concealment of godliness, of Hashem in the world, that he experiences and understands the lie of it all, and cries out in distress, as it were, to overcome this lie. Unlike the higher level within this servant, which is the world of Torah mitzvahs, which is anything but distress. It's pleasure and delight, and it's godly and it's luminous. But both this avodah of tefillah and Torah mitzvahs with delight, in general, it's the higher category of servant. On the contrary, this servant, this eved, this yid, this chassid, when he davens, is extremely animated when he davens. It's not Kabbalah soil, compelling himself to say the words, but he's animated in davening. It's a tremendous chayas, but it's not joy, it's embitterment, determined to overcome, to sacrifice. Davening is all about being the sacrifice. Adam ki yakriv, the first maamar we all learned. So it's with great energy, but it's not the avodah of Oir tzadikim yismach. But on the contrary, the pasuk continues, Ner reshoyim yidach, the flame or the candle of the wicked. Rashi explains, the commentators explain, yidach means the flame springs away from the wick, the opposite of the tzaddik's illumination. What's common to both these levels of avodah is the person is highly animated and motivated, either in joy and love, or driven, embittered, as it were, in the most positive way, to overcome the concealment and dissolve it, offering himself as a sacrifice to Hashem. Learning is not a sacrifice, on the contrary, it's to fill the mind and understand. But davening is korbanos. the opposite. But in both scenarios, and it's the same chassid, he is deeply alive in his gewalt of tefillah, deeply alive in his joy and pleasure and delight and experience of Torah mitzvahs, and appreciating God's joy in the joy and delight of a Yid. That's clear, yeah? And that then there's a second, it's a third level, but the second category of servant, there's no life force, it's Kabbalah soil. And yet he concluded the end of Ois Vav, that Dafka, the Havayeh of Kabbalah soil, of the lower servant who feels nothing. He's not embittered over the concealment of the world. That's what it is. It is what it is, and he does what he has to do. There's no great urgency, and there's no great energy, but he does what he has to do. So, let's continue how this level, as he says, is able to reach to the perfection of Avodah. Dafka through this lowest Kabbalah soil. Let's see the words of the Maamar. Ois Zayin. To understand the matter, so sometimes, so he's talking about, it's the same person, we're not talking three different Avodim. It's the same person in different stages in life, but even in the same stage in life, in different matzovim, different circumstances. So sometimes he says, a person, and actually now he's describing not the same chassid, but it's kind of a different, sorry, take that back. The first two levels are the first two levels. He's not holding by in either of them ever. So such a person cannot come to this cry of his heart, because he has a very lowly, shallow soul. Mitachtis, on the next page, right? You have the same layout, the next page. Hamadregas from the very lowest levels. Let me elaborate a little bit. Just the other day, somebody asked me if I any commentary in Chassidus on the story of Pelegesh Begiva, the concubine and Giva. It's a story in Tanakh that is violent and tremendous bloodshed. It starts with a very gory, terrible story involving one young woman, and it ends up with carnage. Is there any explanation in light of Chassidus? So not that I know of, but what I did tell her is on a particular story. What I did tell her is that we look at the stories in Tanakh and they boggle the mind, how people are capable of such violence and cruelty. And the answer is because they're much loftier souls. So their highs were beyond us, and when they sinned, they're equally beyond us. And so we shouldn't judge them based on our very shallow and delicate sensibilities. Their minds, their hearts were immeasurably richer and deeper and complex and deep and powerful. The stories remain the stories, that they're relatable. We're talking about human beings, but we need to have this caveat, this appreciation that they're extremely intense people, and the reason for that is higher souls. Now that needs to be explained for a moment as well, because aren't all souls equal? The answer is yes and no. The answer is yes at the root, absolutely, but not equal at all in terms of the soul's descent from that essential essence within Hashem into the body through the process of Seder Ishtalshalos, which we've talked about in the past, describing it in detail, which I won't go into now, but just we get the general idea that the journey of the soul into the body differs radically from one generation to another and in a given generation. All souls obviously descend from the essence of Hashem into the body, it goes without saying. But the nature of the journey through the spiritual worlds, again, differs radically. As the soul descends through the worlds, does it fuse with them and therefore assumes the limitations, or simply assumes the limitations externally but not internally. The example that I've given on previous occasions is a person living in a foreign culture, foreign country, so he needs to adapt to the culture and the language and so on. There's two possibilities. One that does that externally but still retains his identity before he came to this particular country, particularly if the culture is less sophisticated than his own, or one that completely adapts and becomes part of the scene. They are the lower souls. The lower souls descend through the world, become all the way down, become part of adapting to the pnimius, the limitations of the worlds through which they descend. As the tzimtzum is greater, the worlds are more and more defined and limited as the lower we go down the chain of divinity. And the loftier souls, go through that journey, but they only assume the limitations externally. They retain their godly identity uncompromised. So as I said, this journey of the souls, there's a generational thing, and within a generation there are differences. To rephrase all of this, all of Klal Yisrael comprise one great spiritual body. The earlier generations were the heart and the brain, and we are the toenails of the great spiritual, historic body of Klal Yisrael. The analogy to the body is absolutely, they are reflective of the soul, because the makeup of the body does reflect the soul. And hence, the body works quite the same way, in as much that the DNA is the same everywhere. Every part of the body, not the external structure, as we just explained at length. So, as you started saying, so a person cannot not experience this Gewalt in Tefillah that we described at length now and yesterday, either because just a shallow soul, just not capable of such an emotional experience or intellectual experience. You can say all the words, we're talking about the mind truly grasping and seeing it. That's one reason why, or more to the point perhaps, or maybe not, but or top of the page, is Gasha Miyod. He's become very materialistic. He's unresponsive. The world conceals, there's suffering in the world. Yeah, he gives his tzedakah, but he's not moved and there's no gewalt. He's not agitated or restless because he's become coarse. Machmas chatoim v'avonos, because of sin and transgression. So that coarsens the soul, dulls the soul. Sins dull the soul, much like the idea of a stain that doesn't allow the light to penetrate, the stain on the soul. So he's dulled and insensitive. Again, he's still writing the check. When asked, he's a nice guy, even generous. But to say that his davening is any measure of any real feeling, of any vayitzaku b'tzar livam, absolutely not. So for these two reasons, actually they're both reasons. He's to begin with a little soul. He's not capable of such depth. But he's capable of something. But even that he doesn't experience, because he's coarsened himself to repeated self-indulgence. All kosher. It's all kosher. But just being constantly wrapped up in his own need and lax and so on, there's no room to be sensitive to anything that's real. In the words of the Maimah, he doesn't get moved by anything. Not only is he not moved by and the world conceals God and appears to be independent, and he wants to overcome this great lie. That doesn't move him. But moreover, he's not even moved by his own state, his own constraint, his own insensitivity. And that's because the sins and the transgressions. It's a pasuk, for he does not have the understanding of man, to be moved by something godly, by truth. What is he excited about? He only gets moved and excited and animated by material things, like an animal. And the reason is because of the predominance of the makif of klipa. Okay, what does makif mean? Anybody?
Surrounding.
What does that mean? You just replace one word with another. What does it mean? What does it mean, makif the klipa? Let's see further. Just like in holiness, there's pnimius and there's makif. It means, pnimius means something consciously experienced, and makif means an overarching state. It's overarching, all-encompassing state, not a particular experience. But the makif is general, and there's English words for this, is, say a person's Weltschannung, that's kind of makif, his overall attitude and state. That's makif, that embraces all the details and the different reactions that have in particular circumstances. That's the pnimi. But the makif is the overarching thing. So you have that in Kedusha. What's a makif and pnimi in Kedusha? Makif generally is the amunah, he's a Jew that he has faith and trust. That's the makif. And the pnimis is his understanding and his feelings, the internalized experience of each moment that he's engaged in. Clear? That's the makif and pnimi kedusha. So he's saying the same thing as in klipa. Kach yesh gam beklipa pnimi o makif. In klipa too, there's the internalized conscious evil and klipa, and then there's the makif. He's not aware of it consciously, but it defines him. He's wrapped in it. Shem Beze Fana Ira, there are two kinds of Ra, of evil. Eifana Aleph, the first one, that's the Pnimi, that is Shemargish Batzmi Sara. He feels it. He's aware of it. He's aware of his fault, of the Ra. He's made peace with it, but he's aware of it. Shenimshach Benavshe Begile B'chinas Pnimi. This is something that he feels consciously. He has a desire, a lust for something which is forbidden. So he knows it's wrong, and he feels it, he's aware of it. And the like. He feels this in his heart. It's a particular desire for a particular thing. That's pnimius, conscious, and he's aware of it. But then there's the makif of Ra. That's so all-encompassing, he's not even aware of it. This he knows is a problem. I'm not doing much about it. But he knows it's a problem. He knows it's wrong. But he doesn't feel it. In brackets, not because this level of Ra doesn't have. On the contrary. Very powerful words, friends. But he's so immersed in it. In materialism, as it were, in his own comforts and needs, it just embraces him and surrounds him. And every single thing about his life is all in this embrace of klipa. It's all about him. Begashmis. His ruchnis, his gashmis. The ruchnis is even his relationship to ruchnis is all on a gashmistic level. And he says, "V'aderech dugma," by illustration, "B'tshukas ha'maise u'matan," the desire for business to make money. They use the word shukim, it's like this thirst or longing. Sheyesh mishu rochik b'tiva mimena. There are some people that by nature are very far from this. They're just not materialistic, and they're not worshipping the dollar, as it were. But sometimes he wants it. Yeah, it would be nice to have a few dollars. He feels this desire and pull for money, for wealth. But that's something he feels consciously, and he'll deal with it or he won't deal with it. But something that is not all defining. It's a moment of desire. However, he's so immersed in it There's another fella, Achanasa Teva Etzlai. This is nature. He says, well, what's the problem? Just like everything else in nature. This is nature, it's the way it is. But it's completely defined him. So then his involvement, this is the paradox here, his involvement in this pursuit of a living, because he wants to make a lot of money, is lo yisparlis halev klal. He's not excited about it. Like, he doesn't know what's the problem, because it's not like he's getting excited and animated. It's deeper than that. And doesn't realize that all that's pursuing here is the profit bottom line, per se. So such a person, he's saying, is not shaykh at all to be moved, truly moved by godliness, by the helm of the world, to daven in a way that Gewalt doesn't feel godliness. There's no Gewalt. Not only is no Gewalt, he doesn't even know there's a problem. Because it's not an occasional taiva, it's a taiva that defines him. That he's wrapped by. Another example he brings, and other evil matters, the midas isnasus. Isnasus means he's got to get the last word. Isnasus means to exalt it, his prestige and covet. It is so all-encompassing that he doesn't even realize that this drives everything he does. In every conversation, he has to be the touche. There's a whole science in this, how to manipulate people and get the final word. Science, so as it were. He's so one with this hisnasus of his prestige, his covered. I just gave the example, getting the last word, but it's more subtle than that. It could be in everything. But bottom line is covered. He should be recognized, acknowledged. So he's on his atzim, he doesn't even know that he's obnoxiously arrogant, but it's so subtle. He doesn't even know it's a problem. He's so immersed in it. It's so definitive of who the person is. This is this klipa, which is makiv. So friends, all is lost. The point is going to say, no, dafka such a person, the Kabbalah's El can reach the highest level. That's where the mind was going here. Let's finish the paragraph. So because he gave two illustrations, but overall because this person's holding, surrounded, just wrapped, it's his bubble of klippa, whether it's making money or whether it's covered or other things, or both, or many things. What's the end result? He's in a situation, he is just not moved by anything godly. That he should daven in a way of tzayka, of crying out of the gewalt, of the meriros that he described in the previous chapter. He's not shaykh to that at all. So again, we're ending here, so it's pretty depressive. But the Maimon is going on to say, no, that so what's he left with? Kabbalah El, nothing else. And if it's real Kabbalah El, as we will learn, he can reach, as he said before, the highest madregas. So continue Be'ez Hashem tomorrow. Today's story, which I guess we'll do part 1. Excuse me a moment, please. I don't know what he's going to say later on the Maimon, but I will just tell you that by Chassidim, today really, you can't do this anymore today. Because today's too PC, and also because the one that's going to do it, it's question whether he should do it. What I'm referring to is that the healthy way of growing up by Chassidim is to get a good frask. I don't mean physically. It's not even that sometimes, but certainly, beruchnis. What?
I think I should leave for this story.
No, you're talking to the story. I'm just continuing the mime. But the story, it's always Ashgacha Pratis anyway, so I won't elaborate, but nowadays that's unfortunately missing. It's become, this, again, politically correct, and for the most part, and don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities. And maybe it should be that way, because to be able to give a frask, you have to love the guy to pieces. Otherwise, you have no right to give it. So if you're just doing it because it irritates you, then you got the problem, not him. The story.